Welcome to toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at restoring this vintage He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Clamp Champ. Now this was very kindly sent to me by Peter, and he said that there were a few issues with it, and there are indeed a few issues that we need to fix. So let's take a closer look at the figure. I'll show you what we've got and I'll show you what needs fixing. So here he is, and let's take a look at the figure first and we can see what's going on with him. As you can see, the overall effect of the figure is he's not in too bad condition at all. There's a few of these mould spots appearing on his legs. This is very common with certain He-Man figures that are produced, I think it's in Malaysia. If we look at the back of this and see where this is produced, yep, it is indeed a Malaysian figure. So these are sort of the plastic degrading basically. Whatever was mixed in the plastic when it was created, it's starting to degrade all these years later, and you get these little black spots. I've done a video previously trying to remove them, and I've never actually found out a way of doing it. I think you just have to live with them. So you can see the figure actually, apart from those spots, isn't looking too bad, but he has one major flaw, and that is his foot. You can see the end of his foot is completely missing. It should look like this, and it currently looks like that. So we're going to have to rebuild that foot. It shouldn't be too hard to do, but I've not worked on the He-Man feet before, so we'll just sort of see what we can do and see how close we can get that to the original. But I reckon I can get something that looks really pretty good using some milliput and a few bits of paperclip and stuff like that. So that's one thing we need to rebuild. Then we don't have his armour, but luckily his armour is exactly the same as Fisto's armour, and I do have some of Fisto's armour. So you can see I've got a few different panels of Fisto's armour, and we are going to make his armour out of that. Basically his armour is a blue version of this. All of these bits are painted blue with just this top section left silver, so it shouldn't be too hard to convert these Fisto armours into something that looks pretty reasonable on this figure. The final thing we need to do is actually to fix his weapon. This is his sort of clamping weapon, and this is how it was sent to me. So it doesn't work at all. One of the arms has come out, the other arm is missing, and none of this mechanism seems to work. I can see inside the spring has come loose, so we are going to have to work out first up how to get this apart, see if we can make something that does the job of the missing arm, which I reckon possibly out of some styrene sheet I should be able to make something, and then put this all back together and try and get it working. So that's the final job. First thing we're going to do though is fix his foot. So to fix this foot on this poor old Clamp Champ, we need to rebuild it out of milliput, and to do that we need to put some sort of substructure underneath so the milliput has got something to grip on, and basically I'm going to build that out of a paper clip. So I'll drill a couple of holes into what's left of his foot. I'll insert a few little bits of paper clip so that we've got something to work on, and then on top of that I will sculpt a new foot out of milliput. We can see using the measurements on my cutting board here how large his foot should be. So it's about 2.5 centimeters long using the little squares on here, and if I show you the broken one, we're missing about 1 centimeter off the end of it. So I need to put in a fair amount of paper clip so it's sticking out about 7 millimeters, something like that. You don't want it sticking out all the way because obviously we need space to sculpt the final shape. I'm going to actually put 2 pieces of paper clip in, one on either side, and sort of shape it into a little wedge shape much like his foot is here, and then we can build the milliput on top. To drill those holes I have my pin vise here with the correct size drill bit in. This matches the diameter of the paper clip I'm going to use, so I'm just going to drill a couple of holes and insert the paper clips and glue those in with some super glue, let that set, and then we can build on top of that with milliput and shape something that I hope will match this original foot. Once that's dried we'll sand it all down and paint it, and hopefully you won't be able to tell that this foot has been repaired. But let's get the holes drilled and the paper clip inserted, and then we can start on the milliput. Milliput is a two-part model in clay, so you need to cut off equal amounts of the two different sticks that are inside this packet, mix them up. Once it's all mixed, you can then start sculpting with it, and you've got about 2 hours to sort of do your sculpting, of which you can smooth it down using water and any tool you like. Then leave it for 24 hours and it sets. Then you can fine-tune it with sandpaper and various files and whatever you like to use to sort of get the final shape. So let's get this mixed up and then we can start sculpting the pieces. I've got the basic shape how I want it, so it's about the right length. So if we measure it on the board, it's about 2.5 centimeters, maybe a little longer. I'm going to let this dry now, and then once it's dry, I'm going to start filing and sanding it and shaping it finally. You can get sort of fine details in much easier when this milliput has gone off, so I always tend to sort of get the basic shape right and then come back to it the next day. But even looking like that, it's not going to be too bad. If that was painted, I don't think you would notice it, but once I do some sort of fine tuning and fine shaping, it will really look the part. So I'm very happy with how that is. We're just going to leave this now for 24 hours and come back to it tomorrow. It's now a day later and the milliput has had time to set, so I can now do fine tuning on this. I've got a selection of files. This is just a nail file. I've got a couple of needle files and I've got some 1000 grit sandpaper. And I'm just going to sort of fine tune this and shape it and flatten off edges and essentially make it look like this other foot. But the basic shape I'm very happy with, and the milliput has dried nice and firm and is attached really strongly. So yeah, let's just get to sanding and shaping. there we go. I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. I've flattened the bottom of it so it actually stands quite flush to the floor, and I've shaped it to as close as I can get to the other foot here. And I think by the time that's painted you won't notice it. It's also about the same length, so it's about 2.5 centimeters long, and this foot is also about 2.5 centimeters long, so they should match. By the time that's painted, I don't think you'll be able to tell that that has been replaced. Now I've got to sort out some paint, and I've been going through my paint pot here. If I show you, if I bring this in, you can see this is my selection of paints. I don't have a huge amount of brown colour paint, so I'm going to have to sort of mix and match something. I've got a game colour brown, which is called Beastly Brown, which sort of matches the Clamp Champ's body colour, but I reckon that with a bit of black in it I should be able to tone it down to match this foot colour. So I'm just going to do a little bit of mixing and see what I can get. Also, these boots are incredibly shiny. Generally when I finish painting something I sort of finish it with a satin varnish, so that matches most sort of action figure paint finishes, but on this one I think I'm going to have to use a gloss, so I have a gloss finish here as well. So let me do some mixing and I'll see if I can get a brown that matches this. It's just off black really, so it's quite dark, but it is definitely a brown colour. So yeah, let's see what we can mix. Well, amazingly, that turned out to be a pretty good match. So that really was just some beastly brown with a bit of black in it. And you can see that's matched pretty closely. I'm going to let that dry, then I'll put a gloss top coat on it. But you can see that really is quite hard to tell that the toe has now been completely replaced. So I'm very happy with how that's turned out. It may be I do a second coat of this beastly brown and black just to cover any white that's showing through. But as an initial go, that's really quite impressive. I've managed to impress myself. So yeah, that's really good. That paint's now had time to dry and I'm really happy with the colour match. It is as close as I can possibly get. I think I'm very pleased with how that has turned out. But as you can see, it's a matte finish, so it doesn't match the gloss of the original paint. So what I've got is some gloss varnish. This is Vallejo gloss varnish, which is 70.510. I've just put a bit of that in my palette here, and I'm going to paint over all the areas that I have painted, and that should give it the same sort of sheen and shine that the original paint has. And once that's dried, I think it will be very hard to spot that this has been fixed. So let's get that paint on, let it dry, then we can start fixing the armour. Now we come on to Clamp Champ's armour. Now the armour looks like it is just a recoloured version of Fisto's armour. So here I have a set of Fisto's armour, and really what we need to do is just sort of paint the bottom of this blue, paint that bit blue, and paint all of this blue. But that's not the case, because the armour is slightly modified. Clamp Champ's body is actually based on He-Man's body, so it's a little bit thicker. If I put this armour on, you can see that it won't actually fit together. If I lock in the two tabs at the top, once we get to the midsection, you can clip one side in, but if you try and clip the other side in, it will snap it off. So what I've got to do is extend these bottom little clips slightly. It shouldn't be too hard to do, as this is made out of a plastic that will work very well with plastic weld. So what I'm going to do is just trim off those little tabs there, just this edge part of it, and I'm going to stick a new piece of styrene on just onto the back of this, just to give it about 1 millimeter extra length. I'll do the same on this side, and then I think that should be enough that when we put the armour on, on, it'll actually clip in place. You know, you probably could get away with not modifying this at all and just sort of clip it on one side, but I thought, as I've got to paint this anyway, all of this will be hidden, I might as well do it. So let me trim off these old clips, add some new ones, and then we'll see if it fits. Then we can sort out painting everything blue and masking it all off. But first up, let's repair these clips or modify these clips. So I'm just going to trim those off with a pair of plastic nippers, and then we can make something out of styrene. I've got a bag here of offcuts of styrene. This is all bits that I use for everything else that I make here on the channel, and I've just got some 1mm styrene sheet, so it will essentially be stuck on the back there, and I think that will give it an extra bit of length, and that's all it will need to work. So yeah, fairly simple modification. Okay, so there you go, that's the modified clip. You can see I've just extended it a bit. Essentially I cut the clip that was on the side off, and I've added an extra bit of, in the end, 2mm styrene. I tried the 1mm and it just looked too thin, so I've used some 2mm styrene and just made a new clip end, as you can see there. So that's done on both sides. So that means there's about an extra millimetre of sort of a give on this armour. So if I put these together now, you can be able to see that there's just a little bit of extra space, and I'm hoping that that will be enough to fit around his body. So you can see that gap at the bottom is now about 1 millimetre bigger than it was originally. So yeah, let's try this on Clamp Champ and see if that fits. Hopefully, yeah, it will just be big enough that there'll be room for his chest to fit in. Then we can sort out masking and spraying. But yeah, let's give that a go. So take that apart again like that. Get the figure. So the back plate hasn't been modified, that just stays the same. The top clips haven't been modified, so they just stay the same as well. Just clip on, and then there should be just a little bit of extra room around the sides. Let's see, like that. Still quite a tight fit, but yeah, there we go. That now fits. So yeah, just extending those little clips is enough, and it gives it an extra bit of room so that it fits around the He-Man style chest that Clamp Champ has. So now let's mask this up and give it a coat of paint. Now I'm going to be using spray paint to spray these. I could do it with some acrylics, but I think we'll get a better finish with spray paint. So I've been down to the local sort of car accessory shop, which in the UK is Halfords, and I found this blue, which I think is a sort of fairly reasonable sort of tone of blue. It may be a little bit more vibrant, but that could look quite nice. So I bought this, which is an enamel spray. But before we can spray it on, we need to mask everything else. So I'm just carefully starting to do the masking process. I've got this very thin masking tape, which is about 3mm. So I'm going to use that to sort of go around the edges. And then I've just got some thicker normal masking tape to fill in everything else. And basically, we're just covering this top section. That piece needs to be left silver. So I also need to mask out so that this bit can get sprayed blue as well. And yeah, once that's all done, that should look fairly reasonable. It's going to be as close as I can get to the original Clamp Champ armour, and you should do the job pretty well. Before I put this top coat on, I'm going to spray a plastic primer spray on as well. So we do a coat of plastic primer, and then we'll spray that on, and I may do a top coat on everything afterwards as well, just to give it a nice sort of finish, a sort of a satiny finish. So let's get this masked up, and then we can do the spraying. There we go, those are the pieces painted. You can see the blue that's turned out not too bad actually. I thought it might be a bit bluer than this, but this looks fairly close to the photos that I've seen of the original Clamp Champ armour, so I'm quite happy with that. I probably could have done this a lot easier and just sprayed the whole thing blue and painted the top bit silver, which really is how the original one would have been done. The original one would have been made out of blue plastic with the painted bits on the top, but I've sort of gone down the more complicated route of masking everything off and trying to leave the original silver plastic showing through. So we'll see now if my masking has worked. I'm hoping it has, but sometimes, you know, things bleed underneath and I might have to do a little bit of touching up, but we'll see as I remove this. Let's see how good this looks. Oh, they're pretty sharp edges actually. Yeah, that's not too bad. I was expecting a far sort of worse result with bits of blue sort of leaked underneath, but yeah, that's not looking too bad at all. It's this inside edge might be the harder one to do, just because it was a sort of awkward shape. But no, that's not looking too bad at all. I'm more impressed with that than I thought I would be. I was expecting to have to do a lot more touching up and repairs. Yeah, that really is quite pleasing. Doesn't look too bad at all. There's a little bit of purple showing around the edge of that, but I don't think you'll really notice. And that's as close as I'm going to get to the Clamp Champ armour. So let's remove this other bit of masking, and then we'll put this on the figure and see how it looks. Yeah, that's very nice. I'm happy with that. It's going to look good. So yeah, let's put this on the figure. And there we go. That's not looking too bad at all. I'm very happy with how he's looking now. So we've got the foot repaired and we've got his armour on. The colour is possibly a little bit light. It's very hard to tell. The only sort of reference I've got is online photos, and every photo looks slightly different. So I think overall that's not a bad effect, and yeah, he's looking pretty good. But now we've got to deal with this, which is the busted weapon, and I'll see what we can do to fix that up. As you can see, Clamp Champ's weapon has seen better days. At some point it looks like it's been split apart. We're missing one of these sort of gripping hook pieces that's supposed to swing forwards. The mechanism doesn't work. I can see the spring is loose inside. It looks like a post possibly has snapped off at the front there. So yeah, it really is in a sorry state, and I can only see one sort of way to work on this is actually to split it apart so we can get inside and see exactly what's wrong and exactly what needs fixing. I'm going to have to try and make something like this out of some styrene sheet. I should be able to make something, I hope, using that and a piece of Lego maybe, but until we get the mechanism working, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. So I've got to split this open. I have my penknife here. I can see there are some posts inside where it's glued together. I'm really just going to sort of brutally go at it and see if I can split those posts. The one at the front is obviously split, and as I say, I can see there's a piece missing. That's why the spring has come loose. So yeah, I'm just going to sort of have to go for it and see what happens. Hopefully I can get this apart and then we can try and fix it. But without getting it apart, there's not a lot I can do. So yeah, let's just see what happens. Okay, so that came apart relatively easily. I basically had to cut a load of posts. There's 4 posts at the back and 1 in the middle. Once those are cut, you could take it apart and we can fix all of those at the end when we need to put this back together. And I can see exactly sort of what's gone wrong now. There's multiple issues with this. There is a spring that should pull this middle lever forwards so that it's permanently in this forwards position. You then pull it backwards to pull the claws out. The post that sticks onto should be here. That has snapped off, so that's why that is no longer working, so we need to rebuild that post. Then this claw is bent. You can see it's got a big curve to it, so we need to fix that. That's fairly straightforward to do. I'm just going to put that into some just boiled water and reshape it. We're obviously missing the other side of this, so I'm going to have a go at fabricating it. It's quite complicated because there's a few little gears on here that fit into this little tooth pit here, which is how it sort of moves. You know, that piece slots in there, and as this is pulled backwards, the gears force this thing outwards and it sort of clamps forwards. So yeah, it's a whole load of little issues. I'm sort of hopeful that I can fix it. I can certainly fix the middle post there. I can certainly fix the bend in this. The hardest part is going to be fabricating this, which I'm going to try and make out of some styrene sheet, maybe a piece of Lego to make that post, and then some other bits of styrene to make little teeth there. I've no idea if I can do it because it's a pretty complicated shape really, but we'll just see. So let's get the other bits fixed up. I'm going to make a new post, again maybe out of a bit of Lego or a bit of styrene just to go in there to hold the spring in. That way we can get this mechanism working. Quick bit of boiled water, and then we'll start trying to make the rest of it and just see what happens. Yeah, I'm hopeful I can make something, but at this stage, till I've started, not really quite sure. Right, I'm going to say this straight away. This is probably the most complicated thing I've ever built, because it's not only a complicated shape, but it's also got gearing on it that is really vital to how it works. But after a couple of hours work, I've actually managed to get it to work. So I'm really quite pleased with how this is going. So if I pull this lever now, you can see we have two claws that spring out from the front. So the left hand side one is obviously the original, and the right hand one is one I've made out of styrene sheet. So let me take this apart and I'll show you what I've made. It's really been sort of fairly hit and miss. I've been cutting and filing and fine tuning. Essentially what I'm trying to do is make a mirror image of that one. So you can see I've got fairly close on the shape. I've even managed to put this little sort of beveled edge on the top surface. The bottom surface I've not bothered, it's just too much work. At the end, that is a piece of Lego antenna. I'll put the number at the bottom of the screen. So I've just drilled a hole through. That's 3mm diameter piece of Lego, and that is exactly the same as the original diameter of that little post. And then on the bottom I have constructed, it's a bit messy, but you can see there's two little gears here, and these are vital for how it works, and these have taken me quite a while to construct. So they're about 1.5mm thick, and I've just been sort of cutting and tuning and modifying as I go. I stuck them on, originally they were too big, so I've been filing them down and cutting them, and it really has just been a sort of trial and error process, but I've ended up with something that does actually work. So let's put this back together again and I'll show you how it works. You've got the little gears here, and they need to fit in these three little gear holes on the bottom. So you put this in sort of in the closed position first, and we do the same with the one that I have made. That goes in the closed position, so everything is sort of held together. And then we get this top piece which has the spring on it, and you can see I've replaced the post there. That's where the spring hooks onto, so you hook that onto there, and then this bit sort of hooks over the back. That's one of the posts I cut when I had to take the thing apart, but there's still enough of it there that this mechanism all works. Then you take the top section like this and pop it over the top, make sure everything lines up, and I can now just hold this together while we'll test it. And if I pull this lever, you can see they spring out and they do actually work. So that is probably the most complicated thing I have ever made. Hard to explain how I did it, basically just trying to copy the other one and measuring and cutting and shaping, as I say. So it's taken a couple of hours to get it to work, but I now do have a piece that works. Obviously it's the wrong colour, so I'm just going to give that a quick coat with a primer spray, that grey primer spray, the same one that I used on his armour. And then I have some red spray paint, which probably won't match this, but it'll be close enough. So I want to get those bits sprayed up and painted, and then we can glue this all back together, just glue along the edges. But there you go, I've managed to get this thing working. I have to say, when I started I was very dubious as to whether I could actually get this to go, but it does work. So yeah, very pleased with that. So yeah, let's get that bit painted up and then we can piece it all back together. And with the magic of editing, here it is painted. The red spray paint I had was actually not a bad colour match. It's a little bit more red than the sort of orangey red that the original plastic is in, but it doesn't look too bad. And by the time this is all covered up, you only see these claws fleetingly when you press the button, and sort of they flip out. So actually on the whole you won't see them. So I think it's going to work really nicely. So the final thing to do is to put it back together one final time. So you can see I put the claws in exactly how I showed you earlier. They are clipped into these little sort of clipping pots on this lever here. We've got the spring over the new post that I put in there, so if I put the top back on like that, it should all fit and it should still work if I do that. So we just have to glue it back together, and this plastic actually works fairly well with plastic weld, so I'm just going to drop a bit of plastic weld around the sort of seams at the front and the back, and I think that should be enough to hold it together. Obviously I cut through the posts inside. I don't actually think that's going to make that much difference if I don't glue those. I think putting some plastic weld along the seam should be plenty. If it's not strong enough, I'll take it apart and maybe put some super glue just on those bits, but I think plastic weld should do. So let's get this all sort of fixed back together, and then we can put it with the figure and see how it looks all complete. And so here we go, here is the finished Clamp Champ, and he's looking really nice and very displayable. We've obviously had to rebuild his foot because that whole front section was missing. I've modified some of Fisto's armour so that it now fits by adding a little bit of extra length to the clips, and then repainted it to try and match the original colour blue of his armour. And then we've completely rebuilt the clamp weapon, making one of the sort of clipping parts or the clamping parts from scratch, and as you can see, that now works and is really quite a displayable piece. So I have to say a massive thank you to Peter, who very kindly sent this poor, very damaged clamp champ in. It's been a really fun project, lots of interesting things to do, lots of new things to try and build, and I think, as I say, probably the most complicated piece I've ever had to sort of match and rebuild in making that claw section. But it's really been worth it because I've ended up with a very displayable piece. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.